This is part 2 of a 3-part podcast.
Hey, this is T. Blankenship. Have you seen the new video of Wheaton Labs? It is permaculture awesomeness with all new and improved things like more rocket mass heaters, easy bake coffin, Willy Wonka, rocket cooktop 2.0, and the truly passive greenhouse. To see more, go to permies.com/tour. Again, that is permies.com/tour.
Many years ago, I created a web page about cast iron use. And because there was nothing on the internet to talk about how to use cast iron skillets, nothing. It was just empty world. So I created something to talk about it. And now, man, I think that there's got to be, I'm going to guess 50 million people that, you know, are bonkers enough about cast iron stuff. They've got all their own, you know, a bunch of philosophy sets that I think are wrong, but who cares? The thing is, it's gone wild. And now granted, cast iron use was going on long before I ever came around, but I also kind of feel like it was getting to be less and less and less and less. And it's because people wanted the non-stick thing. Then there was a similar sort of thing about hugelkultur. There was nothing on the internet about hugelkultur. So I created something about hugelkultur. Now there's all kinds of people doing hugelkultur, mostly doing it wrong. but still, it's going. It's taken off. It's gone. So here we are. And a lot of composting toilets are being banned in a lot of communities. And, you know, they got some good points. And so it's like, okay, can we come up with something that's going to be something that is more likely to be embraced by those regions, counties, states, you know, something that can be embraced by them as being better than a sewage treatment plant. And I think that this design is capable of doing that. But you're right, so much more work to be done. But there's enough that has been done. I think we've got it dialed in really well, and it's ready to be shared. Alan, would you agree with that?
So what you're saying is, in my engineering ears, is like, okay, we've alpha tested this thing to the point where we're saying we now need beta testers. I'd say, yeah, that's probably accurate. We need some beta testers. We haven't characterized it to the point where it's like, all right, general release, everybody do this now, because we need to characterize it, like you said, in other climate zones and so forth, and get other people's experience with it, beta test, and get it dialed in. So I think you're at the point of release to beta and and then continue to refine so you're ready for general release.
I think that what you are proposing is perfect if somehow we had $200 million a year coming in. You
just solve the problem. Just go.
We can organize the quality assurance teams. We can organize the engineers to be creating the next versions. We can, you know, take care of PR and all the other things. And of course, how much we earning on doing this? Not a fucking thing. So we're sharing this information freely. We're not getting paid to share it. And you know, maybe there's going to be some other organization that can find a way to monetize it, and they're going to do the things that you suggest. At the moment, we'll probably continue to do experiment, and we may even expand into doing some of the research with the numbers. But of course, we're not getting paid. Mm-hmm. And so I think Stephen gets paid 10 times more than I do. And I know your pay is shit. I think you get paid less than minimum wage, and I get paid 1/10 of that. So it's like we're doing this not because there's big money in it. We're doing this because we believe it's right. Yep. And so we've dialed it. We have worked hard on this for 11 years. And the idea was done before this. Like when they did that rocket mass heater event, that's part of the first 4 DVD set. That was done just outside of Missoula before I owned property, and they made a wheelie bin pooper that was actively used there for the event. So what I'm trying to say is that it's like we do this stuff, we invent and share and whatnot, but yeah, and you're saying we need formal testing, and I'm like, yeah, I agree. You do that, I'll wait here. So, but I think the first thing to do in order for this to get the traction that you seek, I think the first thing we have to do is, I think we're ready to share it. We've kind of talked about it a little bit here and there for many, many years, and we've got it dialed in well enough now that it's, I think, just by barfing it out there for others, I think it's the best. I think it's better than any of the others. And I can see Alan nodding his head.
Well, what I'm thinking here is what you're basically saying is, instead of a for-profit engineering release cycle, you're basically free open sourcing. And so you're looking for beta testers who are doing it as part of an open source community. Right? If you can't pay beta testers, I know the analogy is not perfect, but you get what I'm trying to say. It's like, yeah.
I'd say go ahead and do this. I mean, if people are thinking about doing humanure or composting toilet or poop cooker or any of those other things, I think what I'm saying is that you will be far happier with a Willow feeder system than any of those. And so that's with the information and the knowledge that we have at this point, which does include a fair bit of speculation based on, like, for example, the math behind the pathogen counts after 2 years, you know, and so I think that the math says that in 3 months, the pathogens are pretty much at zero. And so, we're advocating for 2 years, which we have adhered to. And I'd say a weak spot could potentially be where other people might choose to do this and they'll just do 3 months. And I want to advocate against that. I want there to be no question about the safety. So Alan, I'm leaning on the math here with the reports that I have read about how long these pathogens live outside of the body under which conditions. And so I think, for the pathogen stuff, the math says, no, we are ultra safe. You could use this on food. You could use this on root crops. But, we've added an additional layer of safety saying, we're going to put it at the base of a willow feeder. Or a willow tree.
So, of course, for me, I'm an engineer, not a mathematician. So I'm like, okay, let's do the math and then let's actually look at it. So what I would want to do is, like, let's take this process and then take samples periodically take samples and actually measure and see that our theory is, matching the math. Is there some unknown factor that we're not taking into account that's making the pathogens fall off faster or not quite as fast? Because, you always start with the mathematical model and then you say, all right, let's validate that our mathematical model is aligning with reality because there might be factors that we hadn't anticipated.
All right. Let me come at your engineering mind from a slightly different angle. Let's say we have 3 entities. 1, humanure done poorly. 2, humanure done well. And 3, willow feeder system. In fact, willow feeder done poorly. We'll go that far. But it was 2 years, but they were sloppy about it. I'm not sure exactly what flavor of sloppy, but that is, we don't know the flavor of sloppy for humanure done poorly. So, you pick one of these 3, Alan, and all of your neighbors are going to implement this. Which one do you pick?
Well, definitely not humanure done poorly, because that creates a mess.
I'm glad we had this chat.
Right? That's definitely off the table. And then, of course,
it's usually all over the floor.
Yeah, it's like that's not good. All right, so then of course you know my next thing. Okay, quantify what you mean by poorly, because it's like, okay, so I get the direction, the flavor you're trying to go to. I can't answer the question with just poorly. What I would say is that in all likelihood, a year for the with sequestering the way you were sequestering in the Willow feeder would probably be more than adequate. I would, if I just had to, with no additional scientific information, had to guess between 1 year of Willow feeder and humanure done well, like really well, I think that they're probably both going to be safe if you do humanure well. But if you do if you did humanure really well and it was just done like exclusively well, I think you can be fairly safe. However, if you're not there, if you're sloppy at all, there are ways to make a problem. So if it were that, then I think that I would take the year plus with the Willow feeder as being less likely to have pathogens.
I think that humanure done well still is weak. I mean, I think it's better than an outhouse.
Yep.
And I think one could make an argument about how it could be done really well to be on par with a septic tank. Actually that would be tough. I think it would have to be done really well to be as good as somebody using a septic tank and drain field. And I think Willow feeder is way out ahead of all the options. But and that's without having run the numbers, without having done the testing.
Remember, I mean, I'm coming at it from an engineered perspective, which means anything I'm looking at is going in as a engineered solution. We're putting it in and going for it permitted and so on and so forth. Now, if you're talking about something that people are running on their own, like in a homestead that is not an engineered, tested, delivered solution, then they're going to have a hard time getting the humanure system to be fully pathogen free. Now, I would also state that in the United States of America, we're completely ridiculously over the top with everything has to be pathogen free. As a matter of fact, there's now evidence that our children are growing up and we're trying to keep them in such a pathogen-free environment that their immune system is never challenged, and that therefore their immune system is lacking what we call hormesis, which is and so you go looking at it and you realize that children that grow up on farms playing in the cow manure are way healthier than the children that grow up in the over-sanitized urban apartment where every surface is scrubbed with a disinfectant. Those are the kids who tend to have deficient immune systems and are allergic to everything. The kids that are out in the farm playing with the pigs and the cows and the chickens, right, walking around barefoot in their poop, guess what? They tend to be really healthy and not have all those crazy allergies and so forth. So it's we can get to the point where we're just it's like the over sanitized sanitization gets to the point where our immune systems are not being properly challenged and developed in youth, and it becomes a problem. So I just want to throw that out there. It's just that's actually now become discussed in the engineering and physiology and health side of things, that we're over sanitizing and we're getting to the point where it's just ridiculous. And so it's oh no, we got to get this down to 99.999999%, blah blah. It's our ancestors never lived in a world like that. And our immune system actually gets understimulated if we are constantly in a world like that. And so it's like, do we get it below the proper threshold? If we get it below the proper threshold, we're good. And it's like, yeah, I've traveled around the world and there's people who are really healthy, probably healthier than the average American, living in conditions in which the sanitation is good, but not quote unquote perfect. And that small amount of challenge to the immune system is actually important to our health.
Let's explore for a moment. I mean, you're opening up doors that again go into hundreds of hours of discussion.
Yeah.
But I want to touch
I'm
back.
good at that.
Yeah. I want to touch back on the idea of the compost pile. So with a composting toilet, it might contain the compost, and then, or with a humanure system, you have a pile outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
And with either of those, and you touched on this before, you said cubic meter. Bigger is a little bit bigger than that is actually substantially better, but
correct.
However, whatever the size is,
mm-hmm.
the idea is that the material will heat up to above 140 degrees and thus sterilize itself. And at least in the middle. So that
right.
means that the pathogens that are in the middle, let's say it's the size of a basketball, is now sterile. And it's safe from pathogens. But the rest of it didn't get hot enough.
Right.
Now, the advocates for these systems are like, well, yeah, you're supposed to turn the pile.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, A, people get lazy and they don't do it.
Right.
And B, and this is more important, is that when you turn the pile, then all that stuff that became sterile in the middle is now spread out a little bit. But then what's on the outside is a mixture of the sterile stuff and the not sterile stuff. So all through the whole, you turn the pile so thoroughly, you're so good at this, throughout the entire pile is pathogens. And now the stuff in the middle will become sterilized again. You didn't kill all the pathogens. You could turn that pile every day for 30 days, and you still didn't get rid of all the pathogens. I mean, they aged out. Most of them aged out. But during that time, there were two important things that happened. And that is that flies came and landed on top of the pile and got it up. Now, granted, whenever I say that, they're like, oh, yeah, but you're always supposed to put a whole bunch of carbon material on the top. And it's like, but when you turn it, did you put some more on the top? And then they'll say, well, you can. And it's like they're just dodging the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Then they're not even dodging it effectively. But then the other thing is a lot of times people go and they throw fresh, raw material on top of the pile, but they didn't have the energy or aptitude or something to throw a high carbon material on top of that. So they just left it out. Or more common, they did throw something on the top, but it wasn't on top of all of it, because they're running out of carbon material. They're trying to save it for later. And so
one of the things to just point out to everybody who may be listening is thermophilic compost is a batch process. And when I do teach it, I basically tell it, it's like, look, you do not take the cake out of the oven and add fresh eggs halfway through the baking process. It's not how you bake a cake, right? Thermophilic compost is a batch process. You start with it, and what you start with is what you take through the whole process and you finish. You don't add new stuff. There are other forms of composting that can be continuous add. If you want to be doing that, you're looking at things like vermicomposting, other forms that you can be continuous add. Thermophilic is not a continuous add. Just like baking a cake. Once you make the batter and you put it in the oven, no more adding ingredients, right? So that's why I said there are engineered ways of turning the compost so that you get a known attenuation of pathogens every time you turn, and after a certain number of turns, you're below a relative threshold, and therefore you create a safe product. However, those tend to be engineered. There are things like windrow compost turners where we have a mechanical process which turns it inside out in a very predictable way, and over a certain number of days and a certain number of turns, we've attenuated the pathogens, and we can reliably measure that in an engineering setting and saying, yes, this is now and the other thing we're getting is that as we multiply the good bacteria, fungi, and so forth, they actually do competitive exclusion to the bad guys. And you see that we keep the environment highly aerobic. That's also disadvantageous to our pathogens because most of them are anaerobes. And so this process of doing this, we can reliably create a high quality product. Trying to do that by hand is a skilled thing. It can be done, but it's much harder to do it by hand than it is to do in a reliable, say, engineered windrow composting large scale operation.
Okay. I want to say that when we're building the first pile, that, or hell, it's pile number 7, but we're building it up. And so 2 times per week or more, people are taking that 5-gallon bucket outside and going splort. Now, this moment in time, splort, okay? No turning is happening. None. 0. And at this moment, I have 2 huge concerns.
Yep.
1, the flies. We talked about that earlier. How dangerous that is, especially with fresh material.
Yep.
Number 2, poop Kool-Aid going down into the drinking water. We talked about that one also. And so these are my 2 concerns. And that's with just day 1 of the pile. Or hell, I don't care. It could be day 7. We're still building the pile. You know, haven't even gotten to the part yet where we're turning it at all. And then later comes the turning. But when you do turn it, then it's like people are probably going to take, in a humanure system, they're probably going to turn that pile maybe once, if we're lucky, maybe twice. I mean, I imagine, you know, a lot of people, when talking about it, they're going to talk about like turning the pile twice. And it's like, still not enough. You didn't turn the pile enough. You didn't get all of it. The way that you're getting rid of the pathogens is really through aging out. But from the moment in time where you went splort to the first turning, I'm saying there was a lot of opportunity for flies and rain to do their magic to make other people sick. That is my point.
Any process where you are adding like high nitrogen material, splort, is not composting in the way I teach it.
Well, I think that in the world of hot composting that is going to be making the gardener's gold, there's going to be like, I have all these kitchen scraps.
Yep.
And I'm going to go put them out there. And then when I get enough, I'll start turning them.
Nope.
And now you're shaking your head. No. What?
That is not composting. Sorry. That's a fermentation process that tries to then turn into composting, and it won't work. When we do any process like this, this is why I generally do not tell people to use thermophilic composting to handle kitchen scraps. It's actually a really poor idea. No. If you have kitchen scraps coming out of the kitchen in a flow, you need a flow process. One of them could be to feed them to an animal, but to an animal system. They could go to your chickens or to your pigs or whatever. They could go into an animal system. The other would be to go to some other form of continuous. Vermicomposting, for example, is a great continuous. And so when we set up processes for, say, a kitchen, like a kitchen at a school or a university or whatever, and they've got stuff coming out, then they've got one of two options. They can either hold on to that food scrap in, like we'll put it into a refrigerator or freezer, like we'll sequester it, put it over there, we'll build it up to the point where we are now ready to bring it out and make a thermophilic compost pile, right? That if you're going to do that, then you have to do it that way. Otherwise, what will happen is all that put together will go anaerobic on you, and you'll basically get this anaerobic decomposition, and anaerobic decomposition creates all kinds of nasty stuff you don't want, including hydrogen sulfides and putric acids and things like that. It's a no-go. Don't do that. So you either put it aside, put it in the refrigerator or the freezer or whatever, or you put it into an anaerobic decomposition state like bokashi, or you take it and you put it into a continuous process system, of which vermicompost is one of the ones that can be scaled up. So you can do a vermicomposting system, and that we've done that before, a large-scale vermicomposting system, and take out a large amount of food scraps from, say, a college cafeteria, and every day that comes out, we process that down, and then that goes into the vermicompost. So, either take your food scraps, store them, and then batch thermophilic, which don't tend to do that, or actually put your food scraps into a continuous process. And this is the challenge with why it's so hard to engineer a composting toilet correctly, because what's happening is composting is an aerobic process, and you're constantly adding new stuff. As long as people are pooping, you're adding new stuff to this composting process. That's why it's actually challenging and requires a very carefully engineered process to do what I would consider a true composting toilet, and why it actually only works really well at a very large scale, where the whole thing can be really hot at a lot. And it's an engineered process. It's not something you're doing in your backyard. Okay. So I'm very particular. I'm very about what I call composting. And so there's a lot of things that are done wrong that I do not consider composting, because technically and scientifically they're not. They don't qualify as composting.
So I guess part of what we're doing here is we're searching for a solution.
Yep.
That a person could implement on their own.
Yes.
And so once we do that, I think that while humanure is so smart in so many ways, it still falls short of what a septic tank can do.
Yes.
I think that the Willow feeder exceeds septic tank and sewage treatment plant, I think. But of course, in order for a Willow feeder to function correctly, you need to mix in some sort of gray water system, which I would advocate a mulch pit. And that's another podcast for another day kind of a thing. But I feel like the key is, like, when we're talking about stuff that you could do at home, I mean, the beautiful thing about, the truly beautiful thing about humanure is not only all of the science that Joseph Jenkins, outlined in his book, which you could get for free.
Yep.
Not only that, but implementation has to be one of the easiest things, but it's like and it's still a step up from just openly pooping on the ground, and I've seen systems too where people are like trying to, poop on the ground but bury it, and it's like, well, humanure is better than that also. Mm-hmm. But I kind of feel like what I want for people is to do way better than a sewage treatment plant, which is better than a septic tank, which is better than an outhouse. And I think we've got the foundations of something that is superior. I love the part where Alan nods as I say that, which is why I keep saying it over and over again just to watch him nod.
So there's a few. So I still have questions. I think this is a fascinating thing, but I'm still wanting to know, like, what's exactly going on. That's why I want the metrics. I want to know, like, what kind of decomposition is. I want to dial this in. The next thing that, like, is a question for me as an engineer, like thinking about how to scale things up, right, is this. How many so if we put hey Samantha.
Hello.
So if we were to do this for a person for a year, how many cubic meters of material have we produced if a person used this exclusively for a year as their way of processing their humanure? Like, how is it 0.5 cubic meters? Is it a cubic meter? Is it 2 cubic meters? Like, to give people an idea of about how much bulk we're talking about to start. I know it's going to reduce over time, but to start, how much bulk are we talking, ish?
How many gallons are in a cubic meter? Does somebody want to type that up into the mighty Google or something? But I think that the garbage cans that we're using now are 27-gallon garbage cans. Clay? I can't hear you.
264.
264 gallons.
So like 10 of those cans would be a cubic meter.
Okay. Now,
that seems a little off just intuitively. I'm trying to think about that.
I'm going to guess that one person with one Willow feeder and one of these 27-gallon cans, I don't think one person could fill one in a year because it kind of breaks down and composts through the year. Like you could add 27 gallons of material to it, and that's only 1/3 full. And so it's because it is breaking down. It is doing some small amount of composting as it's going.
Put Paul's brain on your plot. Do you have a hunk of land but don't know where to start? Do you have a world-changing permaculture idea and you need some feedback? Do you feel like the guy in overalls may inexplicably hold the keys to all your wildest permaculture and homesteading dreams? Well, you're probably wrong. But if you want to give it a go anyway, you can hire Paul for a consultation. He will be all yours for a whole entire hour. Schedule your Paulversation today at permies.com/consult. permies.com/consult.
Stephen, you have swapped out cans more than I ever have. So there's my guess. One person and one 27-gallon can. I don't think one it would be close, but one person I think would not fill that can in a year.
I agree with that. That's a question I have right now because there aren't so many people here. How long is it going to take for these cans to actually fill up at our different Willow feeders right now? And it's like the cans are going to dry out, and whatever decomposition or breakdown is going to be happening before that can actually even makes it into the warehouse, the Willow candy, where the Willow candy is stored. I just wonder, and that's why during the summer events, we always end up swapping cans out during the summer event because so many people are here.
And the material's coming in faster than it can, break down and become smaller.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's cool. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, part of the reason I'm asking that, of course, is I'm sitting here thinking, all right, it's okay. I can see how this is, I can easily imagine how this is done at a homestead level, right? We got 2 people, 4 people, a small family, maybe a medium-sized family, 6 people, whatever, or a larger family, 6 or more people. Okay, then the next step up is like, well, what if we had, we're now moving into, say, a peri-urban area where we've got a mix of rural and suburban, and now we're wanting to use this in place of say, septic and so forth. And not everybody's going to want to have to handle and warehouse the material and then have so we're going to go to maybe a more of a community level process so that everybody, that there's a collection of this material, it's warehoused somewhere where it can be managed, and then it's put onto, it's then after a year or two, whatever we decide is the safest, right, taken out and put. So what I'm trying to figure out is, if you told me you wanted me to do this, scale it up, and say for like a 30,000 person example I was working with, you said, I want you to use Willow feeder technology to handle all of that, the toiletry needs of those 30,000 people. I'm just trying to figure out, okay, how much space, right? If I'm going to keep it for 2 years, how much space is that going to take? And then how many acres of land do I deposit that on so I can calculate that out and just get some idea? Is it just, is it a little tiny bit of space, or is it like a whole bunch of space to warehouse that? And then how much land does that need to go on? And how often can I apply fresh batches to that land? Like, I can't dump a whole batch on the same willow tree once a day. It's going to take a while. So I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around the logistics of scaling this up is what I'm trying to do.
I think that what you're saying is true. I think that if you were to have a community of 30,000 people, I think some people would probably keep their willow candy, and others would be like, oh, there's a dude running a willow candy pickup service. He'll drop off a fresh empty can and take our full can, and it's gone forever. And it's like, twice a year he stops by. Mm-hmm. And or something like that. Or you can call them and say, oh, I had a party and I need to do it today or something,
I mean, cities started with the night soil carrier. Right. Somebody would be driving through and grabbing that stuff as part of the public services.
Right.
So yeah, it's just kind of what I was getting my head wrapped around, like how often would you need somebody to come visit your house to do this? How much space do we need to store it? And then how much land do we need to put it onto? It's kind of just like trying to get my head wrapped around it, because what if I got somebody who said, yeah, you're able to go now that you've got all this dialed in, right? You got it all dialed in and we've got it approved and permitted and everything else. Now we're going to have you build a community of 30,000 people. We don't want flush toilets because we don't want to create black water. We're going to do everything gray water, as much as possible. Right? We're going to try to not create this really nasty black water. And therefore we're going to have no flush toilets. All right. Do the logistics of that. Tell me what that looks like. So I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around, orders of magnitude on that.
What I love about you bringing this up, I mean, on one side it pisses me off, but at the same time, I'm kind of like, okay, you can bring it up talking about willow feeders, but the part that's irritating is that when you talk about composting toilets, or you talk about humanure, or you talk about any of the alternatives, that bit never comes up.
It does when I'm there.
What's that?
It does when I'm there, because I asked the same question.
I think let's say 99.99% of the time that people are uttering the word humanure, it's for their own personal off-grid thing or something,
right.
Yes. And they're not thinking about scaling, you know. But I am. I've been thinking about scaling the entire time, and it's like, and I want to navigate beyond the problems with the other systems, and I think. What I hear you saying, and the fact that you're asking the question, and the fact that you're bringing it up, is you're basically saying, like, this can scale. This can actually scale better than a sewage treatment plant.
Well, I'm asking the question. I'm trying to get my head wrapped around it right now, right? So, and so I had not asked this question before as to what's the bulk and so forth. I think there's some engineering to do here to figure out so it can scale. The question, of course, then becomes, what's the finances of scaling it? What's the logistics of scaling it, and so on and so forth. And then what does it look like to scale it to different densities? Like, for example, when I'm doing when we work with stuff across what's called the rural to urban transect, you go from rural, you get into suburbia, and you get about 1,000 to 3,000 people per square mile is your population density in suburbia. So you got to handle, if I said to Stephen, hey, you got 3,000 people, living in this square mile, you got to handle that. Okay, that's a certain amount, right? Okay, but then you go a little further into urban areas, and you're now like 8,000 people per square mile. So there's a different, it's like, then you get into like what we call dense urban core, and you're like 15, 20,000 people per square mile. So now the logistics of handling this look a little different. And so I've had to design in all of those different densities. And so that's always my mind is thinking about when you give me any potential solution is thinking about the logistics of how we might be able to make it work. And are some solutions more appropriate at certain scales? Like, is the Willow feeder the golden bullet that solves everything at all scales? Or is it better at certain scales and at that particular scale, it's, the economics of it work and the logistics of it work. But if we get into too dense of an area, it becomes a little harder, and maybe we go looking for a complementary technology to handle that. That's how I'm kind of thinking right now.
I mean, the reason why there exists sewage treatment plants is because the groundwater had turned to poop Kool-Aid, and people were getting sick.
Yes.
And they're like, okay, we got to change this. This is not working out.
Right.
Whereas if they started off with a Willow feeder system, then they would have scaled. And granted, when you get to the density of like New York City, it could work there as well. But I think, there's a little bit of extra work that has to happen, just as there's a little extra work that has to happen for the system that they have now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, okay, well, let's pick one. And then we could start talking about economics. And it's kind of like, if you're going to take a house and plumb it so that it'll feed into a sewage treatment plant, I think the plumbing inside the house, you're talking about probably $20,000 or better. And the plumbing from the house to the sewage treatment plant, you're probably looking at $20,000. So $40,000. And I see Alan nodding his head. So my numbers are.
We always look. It's place dependent on what those numbers look like, but it's like we talk about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, right? In all these kinds of things. Scope 1 is like how much does it cost inside the residence, right? Boom.
Yeah.
Okay. Then scope 2 is like, well, okay, now we've also got to amortize. We had to build this entire huge septic system to handle all these houses, and it cost us umpteen millions of dollars. So we got to amortize that. It's servicing, say, 50,000 houses, and it cost us $50 million, so it cost us $1,000 per house, something like that, right? It cost us $1,000 per house, but it's more than that, obviously. I'm just picking numbers off of my head. It's actually a lot more than $1,000 per house. Okay. To create, so you got scope 1 is like, I had to build infrastructure inside the house. Scope 2 is I had to build all this external infrastructure to take care of it, and I got to amortize it over the number of houses it serves. Then scope 3 is like, oh yeah, but that's not all of it, because we created all this other crazy pollution from like manufacturing all the PVC and all the other stuff, right? All the other nasties that had to be there in order to make that happen, but that you don't see. So that's scope 3. And in reality, what happens is whenever I go into a situation and we're talking with this, people want to talk about scope 1 only or scope 2 only. And I'm always the one saying, but what about scope 3? You got all this other stuff you had to do in order to make this happen, and you're ignoring that in the environmental cost of your solution, right? So I think, Paul, what I think I hear you saying is that you want to make everybody be honest with their scope 3 and use a scope 3 analysis of whatever solution that they are proposing, because you feel that if we were to do an honest scope 3 comparison of a Willow feeder to the alternatives, that the Willow feeder's scope 3 would be much, much better than anybody else's alternative. Is that fair?
I'd say that not only is that fair, but like if we go to the Missoula sewage treatment plant, which is a very good sewage treatment plant, then and we look at it and it's like, okay, poop Kool-Aid is being poured into the river at a vast quantity all day long, every day. And it's going to include heavy metals and a variety of other toxins and bacteria that's been stupefied but not killed. So it's kind of like, are we okay with that? And I think that the people that are looking at this video or, you know, or participating in this, I think nobody is cool with that. I think our group is not. I mean, there might be some people that are like, yeah, well, those people are all downriver of me, so fuck those guys. And so, and there's going to be people, but I think for the people that are actually watching this, they care. They don't want to say fuck those guys. They want to, they want to do the right thing. They want to be decent. And what's happening there by those standards are like, it's, what they're kind of saying is like, and it's like, I don't got anything better. So I'm trying to provide something better.
Yeah.
And so then they have an option.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
What I'm bringing in the door,
scale 2, scale 3, bring it on. I'm there.
What I'm bringing in the door is, in addition to the things you're talking, which I absolutely agree with, I'm kind of like asking the questions that I've got to have answers to turn around and go to the engineering and group that would, and be able to answer the kinds of questions and make the arguments that they also have to, right? So it's like, yes, all of the ecological concerns you're talking about, but then there are other things that also have leverage when it comes to talking to the people on the engineering side that we have to convince if we're going to be able to be allowed to scale this up, right? So I'm asking those questions and bringing them onto the table as well.
Along those lines, I want to go back about 27 minutes, something we were talking about, anaerobic versus aerobic. And watch, nothing up my sleeve, watch what I do next. Hey, Stephen, when you dumped that material out, did it smell like earth or did it smell like something damn nasty?
Probably 95% of the time or even more, it smelled just like earth. There might have been like one little waft of something right when you dump it out of the can, but that quickly disappears. And it smells like this beautiful, rich compost.
I would say that is a test for aerobic.
Agreed.
And so it's possible that there was something in there that got bottled up or something somehow, and it kind of went a little anaerobic. But that's just a little pinch. But for the most part, now granted, 7 or 8 years ago, probably 1 bucket out of 3 was coming out stinky. And it's like, but I think we've got it dialed in now. Mm-hmm. I think we're doing pretty damn good. And if there's any element of anything stinky, I think right now the thing that I want to blame is urine diverter stuff. We need to get better at some of our urine diverters. There's a bunch of comedy in that space that needs to be sorted, but, and it's like, like I'm going to make it better. And, they better by a
Paul, you said you were not going to talk about this.
I don't want to talk about it.
Zip it.
All right. Fair.
Well, I think the thing you're bringing up is really valid. It's like, if you're getting that nice earthy smell and you're not getting, I mean, the thing that again, for people who aren't super familiar with this, if you get anaerobic decomposition, there are byproducts of anaerobic decomposition that typically don't smell so great. There are things like hydrogen sulfide, that rotten egg smell. There's ammonia. that comes off of it. There's putric acid, and which smells like vomit, and there's other compounds that smell like spoiled milk, and so on and so forth. Right? So if you're opening up something and dumping it out, you get any of those smells, that's a good indication that it was anaerobic decomposition, right? So it's interesting you say when you first started that you were getting a little of that because, okay, and that you've adapted, and now that you're not, it's like, okay, what you've done is you've tweaked it so that under the conditions that you're working, that somehow you're managing to keep it from you've got the moisture level low enough that it is happening, but it's happening slow enough that the small amount of oxygen coming in is enough. It's like it's like this dance that's like, and you got to have that. So this is my thing of like, okay, we've got it dialed in at Paul's under those environmental conditions. This is where it now becomes really interesting to say, well, what if I tried it in South Florida? Or what if I tried it in California? Or if I tried it in Arizona, where maybe it's drier than you are, and, in an area that's a lot moister than you are? What happens? Does it need to be tweaked in order to keep us in that magic range of dry enough that it's going slow enough that the amount of air coming through? That's the sort of thing I'm thinking about, right? And that's the dial in we've got to do in order to be able to say, yeah, we can take this anywhere and we understand how to do it, and then we can scale it up in all those different locations, because it is a biological process. It's very sensitive to amount of oxygen, amount of moisture, and the temperature. Those are all critical factors in keeping this in the magic zone that you're eking out in your situation.
Which, we could have broadcast Willow feeder stuff years ago, but I felt like it wasn't ready yet. And it takes us 2 years. Like, okay, this batch, we had 1 out of 3 smelled bad. And so it's like, okay, so we got to make some changes. And we won't know whether our changes are good for 2 more years. And so, but now I'd say that for the last 4 years, we've had some pretty reliable positive results. And so, therefore, I think it's time to share with the world where we're at with this, and to get it out there. It's working quite well. And I think I think it's the first time that something that is alternative and low cost is superior to a sewage treatment plant. And granted, one could argue whether it is or isn't, but I would say that arguably better, maybe even much better. And I think even your most persnickety sewage treatment plant people might be like, yeah, okay. But, and it's like there's all kinds of variables and conditions and whatever else. Sure. But all of those can be easily overcome. And so for a fraction of the price, I'm thinking that, you look at the cost of $40,000 to get a house set up for a sewage treatment plant. I kind of think that if you're going to, for all that stuff, if it's got 2 or 3 bathrooms in it and things, and you're going to have a gray water system and a Willow feeder system, I think we're looking at something closer to $5,000 instead of $40,000. Okay, that's my quickie math. Alan, you've done a lot of development in this kind of space. Would you say that my math is about right?
Again, it does depend upon the area of the country you're working in, but your ballpark is probably in the right ballpark, yeah.
Yeah, so about 1/10 of the price.
This podcast is continued in part 3.
In a world on the brink of social collapse, one website stands above the rest to fight back the zombie horde of corporate trolls. Permies.com. Take back control of your destiny and protect your loved ones from the toxic gick coming at you from all directions. Strap on your overalls and start building that bunker of abundance with the good vibes and friendly, helpful insight found at Permies.com.